Chapter 1. Eat Me.
Hello and welcome to the Cosmos video channel. We are an online store specializing in cosplay costumes. You are now listening to our original novel, The Extraordinary Werewolf. If you have any interest in cosplay outfits, you can contact us at cosmos.com. Now, let's begin the story. Previously on The Extraordinary Werewolf. A man named Glenn, a highly trained assassin from Earth, awakens in a strange, medieval fantasy world inside the body of a merchant's son, severely injured and at the mercy of two shadowy figures.
Hurry up, Baggins. This place gives me the creeps.
All right, mate. This kid is a pauper. Not a single copper coin on him. Damn it.
Should have guessed.
Hiss.
Why can't I move? My whole body feels completely broken. The pain is intense. What happened to me? Did I black out during my martial arts training?
Glenn faintly heard a conversation, and his consciousness slowly pulled itself from the darkness. Feeling the odd sensation in his body, he couldn't help but draw a sharp breath. He opened his eyes and saw the tops of dark trees surrounding a sliver of black sky. The people nearby were still talking.
Since he doesn't have anything valuable, we should get out of here quickly. It'll be trouble if we run into any busybodies.
Leaving him here is a waste. I'll just eat him.
Suit yourself, but please be quick.
The voices grew closer, yet a profound confusion arose in Glenn's heart.
Why is their language so strange? The structure and grammar are similar to English, but it's clearly not. And yet, how am I understanding it? Wait, eat him? Me?
A shock of bad premonition ran through Glenn, and he tried to push past his weakness to climb to his feet. However, just as he managed to brace himself on his hands and feet, arching his back, a heavy blow landed on his abdomen. A searing, tearing pain spread from his stomach throughout his entire body. Glenn was sent flying, tumbling several times on the ground. His body was already frail, and now, even Glenn's formidable willpower couldn't stop him from trembling with agony. Sweat poured from his forehead, but he suppressed it, refusing to let out a single cry of pain.
This brat actually survived?
A strange male voice remarked. Glenn turned his head to look. He saw a man with a thick beard, a hooked nose, and a European-like appearance, dressed in coarse cloth, grinning viciously at him. Behind him, a skinnier fellow was hidden in the shadow. His face was obscured, but his build also suggested he was of European descent.
Was I kidnapped by foreigners? Impossible! With my skill and alertness, how could I have been secretly taken here without noticing?
Glenn came from a family of martial artists, trained in deadly fighting techniques. After high school, he enlisted in a special forces unit, executing special missions overseas. He had handled real guns and taken lives. His alertness was naturally beyond question, which made the current scene utterly baffling. He then noticed the Western-style, almost medieval clothing worn by the man approaching, along with the revolver and dagger tucked into his belt. Everything felt wrong and inconsistent, and even his own body felt unfamiliar.
Could I be transported to another world? No way! This absurd idea surfaced, but the more he tried to dismiss it, the more it seemed like the only rational explanation.
Suddenly a flood of memories entered his mind, momentarily dulling the pain and strongly confirming his suspicion. This world. Magic, dragons, elves, dwarves, steam power, kingdoms. A rapid succession of Western fantasy terms flashed through Glenn's consciousness. The original owner's name was Dylan Nibankru, born into a merchant family. He liked to travel extensively, using his family's fortune, occasionally engaging in frivolous behavior. Perhaps it was karma. His immensely rich father suddenly sent a letter saying he had gone bankrupt, but had secretly left a small reserve for his children, enough to sustain them for a while. The letter concluded by advising him never to return home. The original owner, thunderstruck by the news, disregarded the advice and returned home, only to learn of his parents' deaths from his siblings. They told him their parents had been murdered by an enemy, and the police had closed the case. After the funeral, the siblings took their small shares of the inheritance and dispersed. The original owner wandered listlessly for months. When he finally regained his senses, he realized his pocket money was running low. So he bought an extremely cheap house in a remote area within the Zen kingdom and settled down. However, the place was eerily strange, and the original owner lived in constant fear. This very morning, on his way back from buying groceries in the outer town, he felt a sharp pain and a dull impact at the back of his head, and then lost consciousness, until just moments ago, when Glenn's consciousness awoke in this body.
I really did transmigrate.
Processing all this information took only an instant. Glenn didn't have time to dwell on it. He steadied his breathing, once again gritted his teeth, and stood up, locking his gaze on the bearded man. In his current physical state, defeating these two grown men in a direct confrontation was nearly impossible. But for Glenn, the transmigration gave him a chance. Having executed countless assassination missions, he quickly sized up the immediate situation. He had to take them out with one decisive move. His eyes shifted, scanning the two men, his mind calculating their weak points.
Why aren't you speaking? Are you stunned? Just lie back down.
The big man shouted arrogantly, extending a thick arm to shove Glenn over. The instant the arm was about to touch Glenn's body, his gaze focused intently. He bent the front knuckles of his right hand and, like a striking viper, stabbed toward the big man's neck. The two men hadn't considered the weak Glenn a threat at all, and this sudden move was completely unexpected. Feeling immense pressure on his neck, the big man dropped his head abruptly, his tongue involuntarily sticking out, as if trying to vomit. Glenn's right hand quickly withdrew, and his left hand had already snatched the dagger tucked into the man's waist, slicing across the big man's throat in a fluid motion. The other person, hidden in the shadows, finally reacted, but the outcome was already determined. Glenn's retracting right hand pulled out the big man's revolver. Using the man's body as cover, he flipped off the safety, took aim, and pulled the trigger. Bang! A gunshot cracked the silence of the woods, startling a flock of birds. The man hidden in the shadows was shot in the head and fell backward with a heavy crash. Everything happened with such seamless, natural grace, as if it were a drill. Glenn shoved the big man aside. The man was still clutching his neck, making rasping, choking sounds. Feeling a tearing pain in his abdomen, Glenn pulled up his shirt to look. There were 4 freshly healed wounds on his stomach, but one had split open again, and blood was welling up.
Those bastards must have done this.
Glenn frowned, tearing off a strip of cloth from his shirt to cover the wound. Suddenly, he noticed the fallen big man hadn't died and was still making noise. Looking down, Glenn's eyes widened. The big man's face was undergoing a drastic change. First, his mouth was visibly protruding, and it continued to shift. Thick black hair like wild grass was growing over his cheeks and more of his skin.
This guy is a werewolf!
Glenn instantly grasped the situation through the memories. Without hesitation, he raised his hand and pointed the revolver at the big man's forehead. It would take time for the other party to fully transform, and Glenn wouldn't give him that chance. He pulled the trigger, and a click sound was heard. The expected shot didn't fire.
What's wrong?
Glenn repeatedly opened the safety and pulled the trigger, but still no gunshot. He opened the cylinder to check.
No bullets left?
He threw the revolver aside, took the dagger in his right hand, and quickly moved in, pinning the big man's head down. The dagger went straight for the still healing wound in the man's neck. Perhaps due to the threat to his life, coupled with the man's werewolf physique, his strength was enormous. Even with the advantage of his weight, Glenn struggled severely to maintain the pin. His left hand, running out of strength, slipped. The half-transformed head opened its wolf muzzle, revealing sharp, white fangs, and bit down hard on Glenn's wrist. A wave of intense pain hit him, but Glenn didn't dare stop his right-hand movement, continuing to slice through the flesh of the man's neck. He felt a moment of relief, thinking that luckily the opponent couldn't use his full strength, or his left hand would probably have been lost already. Finally, Glenn separated the big man's head from his body. The struggling stopped, and the pressure on his left hand vanished. Pulling out his bloody and mangled left wrist, Glenn didn't rest. Taking deep breaths, he rushed toward the other man. The one who had been hiding in the shadows showed no abnormal signs, but Glenn couldn't be too cautious, and he cut off his head as well. Only then did he collapse to the side, breathing heavily and resting.
Starting with such a close call, I almost didn't make it.
Glenn felt his heart hammering, trying to calm his strained nerves. The wound was still bleeding. After resting for a moment, he treated it briefly. Then, gritting his teeth, he stood up and staggered towards the direction of his residence. He himself failed to notice that the nails on his fingertips had just turned into black claws, and then immediately reverted to normal.
Would you like to hear the next chapter? Or would you like to hear a brief recap of what happened to Glenn?